My name is Hannah, and this is my no-buy year. First things first, I need to give you a quick heads up about the contents of this video. I know that I titled the video, How My No-Buy Changed My Makeup Collection, and I did that because it's actually the first in a series. I'm planning to film how my no-buy changed my skincare routine, how my no-buy changed my closet. There's going to be a short series over the course of this month, December, the last month of my year-long no-buy, detailing the way that my no-buy has changed various aspects of my life, especially my relationship to the stuff in my life. For this video, the only title that really made sense was this one, How My No-Buy Changed My Makeup Collection. But it would probably be more accurate to call it How My No-Buy Changed the Way That I Think About My Makeup, or How My No-Buy Changed the Way That I Buy Makeup. But neither of those really made sense in the context of the series. So I ended up going with How My No-Buy Changed My Makeup Collection. My makeup collection itself, the makeup that I own, what's before me, has changed over the course of the year. I've started a declutter series. I actually haven't finished that declutter series, but in terms of actual changes to what I own, basically I've just decluttered a bunch of stuff, and I will be decluttering more stuff, and I haven't gained anything except for what has been given to me in gift packages. So that is, in short, how my no-buy changed my makeup collection. I think all in all, it has probably shrunk in size and will continue to shrink in size, but that's less important than what is about to follow, which is my account of the way that my no-buy year has changed how I think about the acquisition of makeup and the flow of makeup through my life, and how my no-buy has changed the way that I now think about buying makeup and the way that I plan to buy makeup going forward. Let's go ahead and get into the meat of the video. My no-buy has given me the time and space to really think about how I buy makeup and what the different kinds of makeup are to me. Are they necessities? Are they treats? Am I an artist? Am I an aficionado? Am I a collector? Am I just a random lady who has way more makeup than she needs for her one face? Before my no-buy, I tarred all makeup with the same brush. I bought it when I thought I needed it, I bought it when I wanted it, and I had a hard time distinguishing between those two things. I bought expensive stuff because I believed it was worth the money, according to reviews, without thinking about what kind of makeup category it represented to me and how long it would take me to use up. I bought inexpensive makeup willy-nilly, never thinking about how much space it would take up. Now, at the end of my no-buy year, all of that has changed. I now think of my makeup, the makeup that I own and the makeup that I buy, as falling into three distinct categories. The categories are short-term staples, long-term staples, and long-term pleasures. Short-term staples are the items that I will use up and have to replace possibly several times a year. And for those types of items, I am really thinking now about how much they cost. I'm also thinking about how much they cost in relation to how long it takes me to use them up. So cost per use, cost per day. And I'm thinking about things like eyebrow gel, mascara, eyeliner, primer. I don't generally have multiples of these products. Sometimes I collect multiples by accident if somebody gives me one, or if I get one as a free sample. I usually have maybe one or two extra free samples of mascaras, for example, floating around. But because of my no-buy year, I have pretty much whittled my collection down to one when it comes to each one of these categories. So I only have one brow color product. I only have one mascara that I purchased. I only have one brow gel that I purchased. And when I run out of each of those things, then I'm going to have to buy one more to replace it. I am actively looking for less expensive versions of all of these products because they add up over time. My Givenchy brow gel costs $30, and I used up 4 tubes of it during my no-buy year. That's $120. That's the cost of a Natasha Denona palette. Side note, if I had bought a Natasha Denona palette with that money, I would barely have made a dent in it during the same amount of time, but that's a discussion for later in this video. At the end of my no-buy year, I am deeply unmotivated to buy Anastasia brow products, Sephora primers, Marc Jacobs eyeliners. I want to find drugstore options for all of my short-term staples. The second category is long-term staples. So I have a number of staples that just aren't as short-term. Spot concealer, which lasts well over a year, if not a year and a half, even though I use it every day. Liquid concealer, color corrector. These are things that I use every day that I depend on to build my base for the most part, and they last and last and last. I only have to buy them once every year and a half or once every 2 years. Now, the fact that most of my base products, if not all of my base products, fall into this category might be in some ways specific to me, because I try to use as little makeup as possible to even out my skin tone when I'm putting base makeup on my skin. I'm not someone who goes in with full coverage foundation and full coverage concealer. If I were, then these types of products might actually be short-term staples. But for me, they last and last and last. They're long-term staples. I'm willing to spend more in this category to get the best products, because the price per use or the price per day is very, very, very low, whether I buy drugstore or high-end. So for example, my NARS Soft Matte Complete Concealer, which is what I use as a spot concealer, it costs $30, but it lasts a year and a half. At least a year and a half. I'm still finding out because I'm still working on my first pot, but I think at this point it has lasted well over a year, if not already a year and a half. So if it lasts a year and a half, then it costs $0.06 per use or per day. That is a fraction of a cent. If I bought a drugstore concealer that happened to be the same size, and this is setting aside the fact that a lot of drugstore concealers don't actually contain as much product, but if I did buy a drugstore spot concealer that was the same size, and say it was $8, that would be costing me $0.016 per day or per use, an even tinier fraction of a cent. But to me, with my current economic situation, the difference between a fraction of a cent and a fraction of a cent spread out over the course of a year and a half really doesn't make much of a difference. So I'm willing to spend the $30 once every year and a half to get the high-end product that I know is a perfect match for my skin tone and that I know performs perfectly for me. I do need to say though that for these types of products, the long-term staples, I personally have no interest in acquiring more than one of each type. This was kind of true before my no-buy year, but now at the end of my no-buy, it is really, really, really true. To me, the point of a spot concealer is for people not to see it on your face. The point of it is for it not to have a presence. So I found one that matches me perfectly, which is really difficult to do with my skin tone and undertone. I found one that matches me perfectly, that is invisible on my skin, that provides great coverage, that wears well, that behaves the way that I want it to behave. I found one that's perfect for me, and I have absolutely no interest in trying out other formulas of spot concealer. I don't need variety in this category. I only want the best. And once I have found and acquired the best, I will only have one, and it's okay if it costs a little bit more because it is long-term. It is possible for there to be some color cosmetics in this category, I think, depending on your makeup routine, depending on your makeup. For me, I think there's only one color cosmetic in this category, and that is bronzer. I only have one bronzer. I've found the perfect bronzer for me, and I use it almost every day. I'm wearing it right now. It's the Kevyn Aucoin Neo Highlighter in Sahara. At this point, it's lasted almost 2 years, and it shows no signs of being finished soon. There's quite a lot of pan on it, but what there is left in the pan is going to last for several more months at the least. It is high-end and it was expensive, but I'm using it all up, and when I pan it completely, I will probably buy it again. For me, it's a long-term staple and it's actually good value for money. But bronzer only falls into that category for me because I only have one and I only ever plan to have one. I'm actually not interested in exploring other bronzer options. If I ever get into the habit of working on multiple bronzers at once and buying other types of bronzers to try, then this item will move into category 3. All right, let's talk about category 3, the long-term pleasures. Category 3 includes all the rest of the color cosmetics: palettes, lipsticks, highlighters, blushes, etc. They are long-term because each one of them takes so long to use up, and each one of them takes even longer to use up because I have so many in each category. Now, in theory, the cost per use of these items is very, very low. Very low, even for a Tom Ford lipstick or a Natasha Denona palette. The number of uses that you can get out of one lipstick or the number of looks that you can get out of that palette brings the cost per use, or really the value per day of the item, down very, very low. Not low compared to other color cosmetics, like not low compared to other lipsticks, but low compared to other types of makeup, the brow gels, the mascaras, etc. However, this theory only holds water if I'm planning to get total use out of every last crumb of those products, to use them consistently and use them up. And that can only be possible if I don't have large collections of these types of products already. But I do have large collections of all of these types of products already. In other words, if I had 0 eyeshadow palettes, if I was starting from scratch and I was only going to buy one eyeshadow palette, and then I was only going to have that one palette and use that one palette, then buying a Natasha Denona palette wouldn't be all that different from buying a ColourPop palette, because the shadows would last for a lot longer because there's more eyeshadow in each pan. It would probably last 2 or 3 years, even if I used it every day. The upfront cost would be higher, but the cost per use would end up being incredibly low, and it would end up being really good value for money. But that's not my reality. I've already overbought in this category, and if I do buy another eyeshadow palette or another lipstick, then that item will go into rotation, not into everyday use, and therefore the cost per use will be much, much, much higher, especially if it's a luxury item. I have to accept, and now at the end of my no-buy year, I'm finally ready to accept that due to the amount I already own, buying new color cosmetics will always be an indulgence, and it can never be considered a good investment. Any eyeshadow, any lipstick, any blush, highlighter, any of those things that I buy going forward will be a treat, a frivolity, a cherry on top. So going forward, I will never consider value for money when I'm buying color cosmetics. If I spend $45 on an eyeshadow palette, that is a sunk cost, gone. If I spend $120 on a palette, gone. That money is gone. I'm not spending money on a useful thing. I'm not investing in my face or in my collection, whatever that means. It's like a ticket to Disneyland. It's like a day at the spa. I'm choosing to drop that money on a treat, on something fun. I'm basically buying the experience of using that thing. And from time to time, depending on the item and depending on my budget, I might be okay with that. I'm no longer thinking, I'm not sure I ever thought of my collection of eyeshadows this way, but I'm not thinking of my eyeshadow collection as a group of things with expiration dates that must be used up before the expiration date, or I can never in good conscience buy more. And to freak out because if I buy more, then it dramatically lessens the chance that I will ever use up every last drop of eyeshadow that I have. I'm not going to use up every last drop of eyeshadow that I have, and I don't have huge amounts of eyeshadow. I know most of you have already seen my collection video. I have more than I need, but it's not like drawers and drawers. It's just one little unit, one little holder full of eyeshadow. It's more than I need, but I think of it as a little bucket of treats, basically. I don't want twice this many treats. This is fine. But from time to time, if I have the money, I might add a treat to the bucket. But I am going to be aware, very aware, that if I ever do buy more eyeshadows, I am treating myself to something that I don't need. And I'm also making that group of treats bigger, which is something I don't particularly relish. And I am also making it harder to get value for money out of what I already own, because the more I have, the less frequently I will use each thing. In a way, a stunning eyeshadow palette, a work of art eyeshadow palette, is something that it makes sense to spend a little bit more on, because let's be honest, I'm not going to use it up, and that means that I'll have it for a really long time. It will eventually expire, so it's not like I'm buying an heirloom or something. It's not like investing in a gorgeous piece of jewelry or a gorgeous winter coat that I can pass down to my daughter, you know. I don't have a daughter, but you know what I'm saying. It's not an investment piece, and I'm not going to think of it that way. But if I know myself and I choose wisely, then it could be something that I will have and love and use for years. That becomes less true if I overbuy in that category. So if I buy 100 eyeshadow palettes over the course of the year following the purchase of that one expensive one, then that will really water down the worth of that one expensive one, and I'll be less likely to love it and use it, and it will really lose value in every way for me. But if I'm not buying very much stuff, if I'm not buying very many, then it kind of does make sense to buy one that's really nice, and it's kind of okay for it to be a little bit more expensive, because it's a long-term pleasure, not something that I'm going to need to replace. But in another sense, purchasing an expensive eyeshadow palette makes the least amount of sense, because I already have so much eyeshadow. So I'm going to be thinking about both of those things going forward. And because color cosmetics take such a long time to use up, this is also the category out of the three that is the most prone to just grow and grow and grow. So it's the one that I have to be the most careful about, because, for example, I have all of these lipsticks here before me, and it's much easier to buy a new lipstick and to add it in than it is to use up one of the ones I have. It takes a lot less time to add in a lipstick than it does to use one up. So I have to be aware that every time I buy one, I'm contributing to the chances that my collection of color cosmetics will just get incrementally bigger, and that's something that I don't particularly want to have happen. I'm sure I will be making a few well-chosen purchases into this category next year, but I will be doing so while staying very mindful that this is potentially the most dangerous category. It is the least practical and the most bloated part of my makeup collection. And so if I add something to this category, I need to do it very, very carefully. There will be two restraining factors, two checks on my purchases of items that fall into this category next year. One will be price. Anything I spend on anything in this category next year, that money will be gone. And I don't want to spend too much on frivolous purchases. And the second restraining factor, as I've just been talking about, will be my desire to keep a relatively small and a relatively edited collection of makeup. So I may have more eyeshadows than I can use up, but I don't want to have more eyeshadows than I can see at one time. I don't want to have more eyeshadows than I can keep in my head, if that makes sense. So that is it. I've developed this incredibly clear and very, very different way of thinking about makeup compared to the way that I thought about makeup at the beginning of my no-buy year. I can't believe how much I used to just smush all of these categories together. I can't believe that I didn't see that buying a high-end eyeshadow, which is something that will last for years and years, and buying a high-end brow pencil, which is something that I would potentially go through in a month and then need to replace, were so incredibly different choices, just really different kinds of choices, that those two products were so different in nature. One's a pleasure, one's a staple, one is long-term, one is short-term. I just didn't have the tools to think about this before, and it took me months of a no-buy. It took me until well over halfway through my no-buy to really start having clarity and to really start being able to form a plan for how to make smarter purchases going forward while still giving myself a little room to allow for treats, pleasures once in a while. So just to recap, I've got the short-term staples, the long-term staples, and the long-term pleasures. Short-term staples are things that I know that I go through and that I'm going to have to be repurchasing several times a year. And for anything that falls into this category, I'm going to be actively seeking out drugstore options or otherwise low-priced options. I'm going to try to find things that work really well, but that cost as little as possible in this category. The long-term staples are the things that I use almost every day, but that last for a really, really, really long time. And because they last such a long time, I don't need to stress out so much about how much they cost during the rare occasion on which I have to replace one. However, things can only be in this category if I only have one at a time. And then thirdly, we have long-term pleasures. Those are the fun makeup items, the color cosmetics that I've already overpurchased. I have more than I could ever need in this category already. And so I'm having to face the music. I'm having to understand that if I buy more into this category, I'm just buying something purely for fun. And obviously there's nothing wrong with doing that once in a while. I'm just not going to mistake it for an investment or for a wise purchase or for good value for money, no matter how much the thing costs, no matter how much there is in the product. None of those things matter in this category because I already have more than I need. I am very curious to know what you guys are going to think about this. I think that it's very helpful when I think about making a purchase now to ask myself, is this a short-term staple? Is this a long-term staple? Or is this a long-term pleasure? I think that that will be a really good guide for me because it will help kind of sort through all of the confusion and all of the claims of all of the products and all of the beauty gurus. It will help me clearly see my own philosophy for having fun with my makeup but not overspending on my makeup, and making wise investments in the things that I put on my face every day and the things that I like to play with. So does it seem useful to you? Do you think that you will try it? Can you think of any hiccups in this system for yourself? Like when you start thinking through the things that you use or the things that you buy, is there a way in which it doesn't make sense? Can we refine this system together? Maybe for some of you, it's really something that wouldn't work. I don't know. I'm just really curious. I obviously haven't tested it yet because I'm not allowed to buy stuff yet. I'm still in December of my no-buy year, but I'm feeling pretty excited about rolling out this system, this new way of thinking about acquiring makeup after my no-buy ends and I'm allowed to make purchases. And that is it. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you will remember to take extra good care of yourself this week so that you can be the most effective version of yourself as you do your work in the world.